Hello guys, how are we doing? Welcome back to the channel. Activision must have heard people being sick and tired about the lack of transparency surrounding the SR system within Black Ops 6 Ranked Play, because they released what they call a white paper which details a bunch of things surrounding SR within Black Ops 6. Obviously this isn't just another YouTuber saying what they think, assuming certain things and guessing. This is directly from Activision itself. I'll leave a link to the source so you can have a look for yourself and sense check me and read it if you want to read it in your own time down below in the description, but it's a little bit complex. I'm here to try and translate some of the things into real person language so that you don't have to do it yourself. So in today's video, we're actually going to be covering a few things. We're going to be looking at how SR is distributed. So what makes you in the top 10%? What makes you above average? What makes you below average? What makes you about bang on average? Okay, what rank do you have to be in to fall in that bracket? It's different from the past. It's not as simple as Iridescent top 1, Crim top 5%, blah, 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 blah. It is a little bit different, and it's interesting how they've detailed it in this. So we're going to be covering that as number one. Then going to be looking at how they define SR and what constitutes a target MMR, how they determine how much SR they give, because I've detailed a little bit about that as well. We're then going to be looking at how SR affects matchmaking, which is an interesting point. We're then going to be looking at how solo queuing versus being in a party affects matchmaking. And then we're also going to be looking at how the raw skill outside of a rank has an impact on matchmaking as well. And then we're going to be summarizing it up right at the end. So if this is something you're after, if you want more news and a little bit more, you just want answers surrounding Black Ops 6 Ranked Play SR, then this video is hopefully going to shed some light on what actually it all means. So we have this graph here, which I've used, which I've made myself from the data, which we're going to get into in a second. But this is hopefully a way that we can sort of simplify what the data means. Okay, so what this basically shows is the share of the overall population of ranked play players in each rank. So this is separate from what they determine as raw skill or like a hidden MMR. This is where people were at the time they took the cut or took the data. Okay, now what this basically shows is that you can see 16% of people are in bronze, 20% of people are in silver, about 30% of people are in gold, so on and so forth. Okay, and as you'd expect, there's a big chunk of people in that sort of middle gold area, and then it dwindles off as the ranks get higher and higher. So it's sort of as expected. If we're going to simplify this even further, okay, you've got a 100% of the player base here, and you've got essentially the proportion of which each rank holds of that 100% player base. So you can see, first of all here, average smack bang. If we look at the 50% line here, pretty much smack bang in the middle of gold. Okay, so if you're gold 2, you're probably about average compared to where everyone else is ranked. Okay, not where their hidden talent is or their hidden MMR or their HPR, whatever you want to call it. Based on what SR you have, that's pretty much average. If you're in bronze, you're in the bottom 16%. If you're in silver, you're between the bottom 16% and the bottom 36%. Okay, so slightly below average. As I say, gold is between 36%, the bottom 36% and the top 34%. So depending on if you're gold 1, you're probably slightly under average. If you're gold 2, you're probably about bang on average. If you're gold 3, you're probably, better than average, which is quite nice to know for some people, because people often think gold is, there's so many ranks above it, it can't be average. But gold 3 is actually above average. So commend yourself. Don't be too harsh on yourself. Platinum is between the top 34% and the top 13%. So if you're very high platinum, you're actually almost in the top, you're in the top 15% of all players who play Black Ops 6 Ranked Play. So that's actually bloody pretty good. Diamond is between the top 13% and the top 2%. Crimson's the top 2% of players, which is less than half of what it was beforehand. And Iridescent is the top 0.5% of players. Okay, so that's a real fine amount of players who are in Iridescent. Now, again, the next slide is going to be how this data came through, and it's going to be a direct link to what Activision put in their white paper. But a little bit of an anecdote to this is the fact that, or a limitation of this data, is this doesn't account for people who have played 1 or 2 games. Okay, so this might be slightly more weighted towards the left-hand side here, which is why it might differ. In previous times where they've released data like this, they've had the data only consists of people who've played a minimum of 30 games. This isn't that. Okay, so it might be slightly skewed based on the fact that it maybe there's probably a bunch of people in this data set who have only played 10, 15 games. Now, this is what how I got that data. Okay, so these add up. If you add all these percentages up, they add up to the percent in bronze and silver and gold and stuff. So that's how I built those graphs from this data. And this data directly comes from that that little bit of a document released from Activision themselves. Okay, so it's quite complex, which is why I've tried to summarize it. But what is interesting about this graph, which is why I still included in today's video, is that it does show the relationship between what they determine a good player and a bad player and where they end up being ranked. So you've got the ranks along the bottom here. You've got bronze, silver, gold, all the way up to iridescent. Okay, and if you total these columns, it gives you the percentage in each of those ranks, which is what we've just seen. Okay, that's no added value to do that. Interestingly, it splits out the percentage of players in each of these skill divisions, okay, their SR, by how skilled the game thinks they are. So at the top, you have the bottom 10-ish% of players. You have the next 10%, the next 10, until you get all the way down to the bottom here, where you have essentially what they deem as the top 10% of players, give or take. It doesn't. The percentages aren't quite right. I'm not sure why they didn't get it quite right, but I think they've just rounded it so that it's fairly clean. What's interesting here is, out of the top 10% of players, I think it works out to be closer to 8%, to be fair. But what about the top 10% of players? Most are in diamond, some are in crimson. And interestingly, a very small amount is in iridescent, which is sort of what we've just seen. But what's even more interesting is there's some in platinum and even some in gold. And I'm saying there's not a number here, but you can sell it. It's a different shade, which means it's got some value. So some people within the top 10% of raw skill are still in gold. And that might be because they simply haven't played enough. Now, if we look on the flip side of that, you can pause this, screenshot this, or again, I'll leave a link down below to this raw data so you can have a look yourself. Within the bottom skill set, i.e. this very top row, 18% of the worst skilled players are in bronze, which is probably where they should be. 4% in silver and 1% in gold. So even though they're in the bottom 10% of players, or 13% if you do the math really, I don't know why they've done 10% when it's 13. In any case, even though they're in the bottom 13%, they're still somehow managing to get gold. So they're probably grinders, right? Now, again, it doesn't account for minimum game, so some really talented players may have only reached gold down here due to playtime. Okay? We're now going to be taking a look at what they determine as SR. So we're going to be covering how they give SR to people and what logic they use to give people SR and give people more SR over other people. So they go SR short for skill rating, which we all know, and is a visible value that represents each player's skill and progression in ranked play. The value serves, so the SR value serves two distinct purposes: to provide players with a visual representation of their skill, which is interesting because we've already seen that even if you're in the top 10%, you can be in gold, so it's not directly representative of that. If that were the case, people would be, pinpoint exactly where they should be. There wouldn't be no hidden MMR. It'd be a visual representation of their skill. But the second purpose is to provide players with a sense of progression. Okay, now that's very important. They do say, though, if SR was purely a skill metric, which is what a lot of people would love to see, many players would gain very little SR from match to match, as most players don't see their raw skill improve much over the duration of the season. So what they're saying here is, realistically, in Season 1, people aren't going to be going from playing even like me to playing like Shotzi. Okay, there's going to be very little actual raw skill improvement within 8 weeks of Call of Duty playing. Okay, so that's, if it was purely based on raw skill alone, you wouldn't see much movement. And they want that player retention and a sense of progression so that people keep playing and keep coming back to ranked play, essentially. They say it would be unrewarding because you'd be put where you'd play a place and match, it put you in your SR, and it'd be like, okay, you don't move much. Even if you don't win or lose, it's just representative of pure skill. It'd be very unrewarding. You wouldn't move much because realistically, you're not going to become really talented all of a sudden. Now, for the sense of progression, people start in bronze and gain SR towards their target SR, which comes from raw skill. Again, I've put more details in my other SR video, which you can check out after this one. And then what they do say, this brings players back each season to see how high they can make it. Okay, so they're trying to retain players as well as make it some sort of visual representation of a skill. Okay, so that's why they do a target SR system rather than just putting people where they think they belong. And they then go to say, on the exact details of SR change from game to game as we continue to improve the experience for our players. There's a few fundamental elements, however, that have remained consistent since SR was introduced back back in Vanguard. Now, what they do say, all players have a target SR. This is essentially a direct translation of how a player's skill percentile correlates to SR and rank. Okay, so that's their target SR. That's where the game thinks they belong. And they've already said they don't just put them there because it'll be boring and people won't stay playing the game. They then say all players have a current SR. This is the value shown to players which will trend toward, and in some cases surpass, the target SR. SR is gained when players win. SR is lost when players lose. When a player wins, we move them toward their target SR as a function of how far their current SR is away from their target SR, and based on how they perform in that match, considering the skill of their opponents. So that's quite interesting. Let's break down that little bullet point quickly. So if you had a target, if you're within the top 1% of skill, what they determine raw skill players, they want you in iridescent, essentially, okay? So what they will do is at the very beginning, they'll give you bunches of SR to build you up to get it to iridescent. But as you slowly get closer to iridescent, you're going to get less and less SR to keep the sense of progression going. And so you don't hit iridescent really easily and be like, okay, I'm here now. Now what? Okay. And again, they do say it's based on how they performed in that match, considering the skill of their opponents. Not the rank of their opponents, the skill of their opponents. Okay. Which is quite interesting. Now, the exact tuning here has changed over years, but the system is always tuned such that the players who participate with ranked play consistently will eventually find their current SR hovering around their target SR. Okay, so they do say here, in order for your SR rank, your visual rank, to be representative at your actual skill, you have to play the game relatively consistently. They don't say how consistently or what time frame we put on that, but they do say you have to play consistently. Now, for those of you who don't know, if you get 30 SR for a win, the game's pretty much put you where you want, where it thinks you belong. Okay, if it's, you know, looking at the graphs before, if it's put you in crimson and you're suddenly getting 30 SR, it's because it thinks you're only in the top 2% of players based on skill. Okay, SR for wins will be higher than the impact of loss until the target SR is met. So that goes with what I've just said. So you will win more SR than you lose when you lose until you get to your target SR. Our approach to SR ensures that if a player is always in a perfectly tight match, they will progress to their target SR over enough games. So what's interesting here, they do try and prioritize people being put into matches that aren't a whitewash. They do try and balance them somewhat. Okay, we'll get onto that later. But essentially what they're saying here is that even if you're playing really tight matches and it's really tight, you're not quite, you know, even if you know going double positive or winning by loads, the game will still have a target SR in mind that will try and keep you pushing towards. Okay, if you play enough games and you get enough wins, you will eventually get there. They then go on to say, unsurprisingly, the very best players in the world don't lose very often. So they're talking about the top 50 grinders who 4-stack all the time. They don't lose very often. It's not uncommon for our CDL pros and players in the top 50 to win over 80% of their ranked play matches. If unmanaged, these lopsided win rates by our best players can lead to SR inflation and an SR system that rewards playtime more than skill. To manage this, players who see their current SR far exceed their target SR, so this is where your rank currently is above your raw skill, or their hidden MMR or HPR, you will gradually earn less SR for wins and may even start to see larger SR deductions after losses. So if you start to see more than 30 SR loss for your losses, chances are it's because the game thinks you're above where you should be. So it tries to bring you back down, okay? So this is done that so the best of the best must maintain their high win rates to continue to climb, and ensures that ranked play rewards both a combination of skill as well as sustained playtime over the course of each season. Okay, so it's trying to reward playtime here, as well as skill. It's trying to find the balance, okay? So again, it's the same as what I've explained in the previous R video, and again, you can see that if you want a little bit more breakdown. So, I touched on this very slightly a second ago. How does SR affect matchmaking? Okay, so I've tried to not cover up too much details here, but you can sort of see here. So, just to explain what these grids are, this is a player rank. So you've got bronze, silver, gold, and platinum, and this is the bars show how frequent they met with someone of that SR. So say, for example, in bronze, you can see most of the time the highest ranked player was in bronze, okay, high bronze, so maybe bronze 3. Sometimes it was silver, and it often veered towards silver 3. Sometimes in gold, rarely in platinum, and there's a couple of nodules here in diamond, but essentially they're saying that in bronze, you mainly matched bronze and silver players. In silver, it's a similar story. In gold, it's a similar story. And in platinum, it's a source it's a similar story. So generally, the highest ranked player in the lobby tends to be the same as the player searching for a match. Okay, but I say sometimes it can be high and rarely outside of the matchmaking limits that you get. You can see the same thing in here for diamond, crimson. Sorry, I'll just move my head quickly. Diamond, crimson, and iridescent. And this is a introduction of how it affects solo queuing versus being in a party, which is quite interesting here. Okay. So what you can see here is that a bronze player searching as a so this is a bronze player searching as a solo player. Okay, and you can see, as we've just seen in other graphs, most of the time they're matched against at highest a bronze player, sometimes a gold, even less, sometimes a silver, even less a gold, and so on, so on, so on. Interestingly, when they're partied up, their lobbies become a little bit more difficult. Okay, so solo queuing essentially means you're more likely to match players of your rank compared to parties. So you can see here a bronze player who's partied up is more likely to match silver players than bronze players. A heavy percentage of gold players will match up against you, and more platinum players than before. So you can see here both the gold and platinum sort of humps, you could say, are higher in parties than in solo for a bronze player. Okay, so essentially, in summary, you're more likely to get harder lobbies or higher ranked people with higher SR when you're partied up, which is, I think, how it should be. Okay, solo queuers should be, have relatively easier lobbies, and it should be easier to find players of that SR. Now we're going to be taking a look at raw skill impact on matchmaking. Okay, so raw skill again is what the game determines raw talent. Okay, it's outside of SR completely. It's like a hidden performance rating. It's MMR, whatever you want to call it. They call it raw skill at this point. Okay, so interestingly, this is looking at a bronze player. Okay, so someone who's only got enough SR to stay in bronze. This is someone who is the bottom 25% of players in bronze, and their matchmaking will look like this. So it's fairly as you'd expect. So they mainly play bronzes, they play some silvers, some golds. Okay. Now, interestingly, if someone's in the bottom 25%, their target SR, or their target rank, will be silver. Okay, so you can see here they're not really playing anyone above that target rank. Now, people whose raw skill or hidden MMR is in the top 25%, which is plat or higher, even though they're in gold, the game will change their matchmaking drastically. Okay, so this is why some bronze lobbies look a little bit different, because the game takes into account their raw skill, rightly or wrongly. I don't think it's quite right in my opinion, but this is how they do it, to determine what players they play against. Okay, so players whose target SR is in platinum, because they're in the top 25% of players, are more likely to match against higher ranked people. You can see barely any in bronze, slightly more in silver, slightly more in gold, and even more in platinum. So they're more like, even though they're in bronze, they're more likely to come against people in platinum where they think they should be. You can see the same here for silver players. So again, bottom 25% of players, where they think if their target is silver, they mainly play silver. But when their target SR is plat, they mainly play plat. This is a similar thing for platinum. Actually, interestingly, platinum, it looks a little bit different here. So you can see the same here for platinum players. The difference is with this graph is that it compares the bottom 25%, which is they should be in platinum as a maximum. So this is someone who's basically ranked in platinum, but they belong in platinum. Okay, this is what their matchmaking looks like. They mainly play people in platinum, some diamond, very few crimson. This is someone on the right who is platinum as a minimum. Okay, so they're still in platinum. They're ranked platinum. SR sits them in platinum, but their hidden SR, their target SR, is platinum as a minimum. The game goes, well, we're going to put you against higher players, okay, to see how you stack up against them. So it puts you against platinum, it puts you against diamond, and more in crimson. So you can see here, just because, even though we're looking at the same ranked player, one who's slightly less skilled than the other will have a much different gaming or matchmaking experience. The note from Activision then goes on to pretty much a summary where it says, this blend of matchmaking on SR and raw skill allows us to provide our players with high quality matches that provide a satisfying progression of SR. This ultimately places players in a competitive environment where their SR is a clear badge of honor reflecting each player's position in the hierarchy of Call of Duty ranked play. So there it is from the horse's mouth itself. Let me know your thoughts. If there's anything you want me to sort of get into a little bit more, because I know I may have skimmed over some bits really quickly, let me know down in the comments. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, because I know this can be a little bit technical. But there's some stuff we already knew. There's some new stuff we've learned. And I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Obviously, this is a very bizarre way of doing a ranked system. But I think as Call of Duty is, it's all about player retention. Okay, so that's why they don't just put you at its rank. They want to keep you playing so you can grind to it. They'll match you against players who are equally skilled, even if you're not ranked at that level, to keep you playing. It's all about player attention, and I think they're trying to find that fine balance between rewarding people and keeping them playing. So that's going to do from me. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you found it useful, and at least it was informative, and I'll see you in the next video. Ciao for now.